I did that last time, I think.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you're well. Today is Wednesday. It is the 20th of September, and we're getting ready for Parshas Ha'azinu, which is going to be followed by Yom Kippur. So today we're going to see some sources on both Ha'azinu and Yom Kippur. My apologies for running a couple minutes late today. Our order of lulavim and esrogim arrived. I was busy unpacking them and trying to get things organized, and I completely lost track of time. So thanks for hanging on, and my apologies for keeping anyone waiting. All right, so let's jump right in. We're going to start by seeing something on Ha'azinu, and we're going to see that it relates to Yom Kippur as well. Now, let me preface this with Ha'azinu. There's a sefer. I don't have it. I could access it online, but I remember seeing this around the Beis Medrash when I was in yeshiva, and after I was married. So there was a shtibel near Leila's house, Rabbi Lezebnik's shul, and they had this there. And very often when I'd be there, I'd take a look at this. The sefer was called Seder Hadoros, which is a fascinating work. It was written by an Acharon, and it was in a lot of ways a history book. So let's just see a brief bio there. You see on top, it was written by Rabbi Yechiel ben Shlomo Helprin, was a Lithuanian rabbi, Kabbalist chronicler. He was a descendant of Rav Shlomo Luria. That's the Marshal, traces genealogy back to Rashi, to the Tana Yochanan Sandler. He was rabbi of Glusk until 1711, when he was called to the rabbinate of Minsk, where he officiated also as the head of the yeshiva until his death. Helprin was one of the most eminent Talmudists of his time. And then here on the bottom, here's what he's especially known for. Helprin is especially known through his Seder Hadoros. It was published for the first time by his grandson, Yehuda Leib Helprin, in Karlsruhe. I don't know how to pronounce that. I think in Germany in 1769. So again, he passed away in 1746. And here's this sefer called Seder Hadoros, which in a lot of ways is a history book. And there's information in here you just won't find elsewhere. And I just remembered, after I was married and seeing this on the shelf, it wasn't something you'd commonly see. A lot of times in between aliyahs at davening, I'd be taking a look at this when we were waiting for davening to start. Always found it fascinating. And again, I never bought a copy, but if I need to look something up, I could always access it online now. So we're going to see something in here that's going to be fascinating. It has to do with Yom Kippur and Parshas Ha'azinu. So you'll see there's two columns. This is in the section of the book called Elef HaChamishi. That's talking about the fifth millennium. Again, the way I guess that he broke up his history part was by millennium. So this is in the fifth millennium, in the fifth period of 1,000 years. So let's see there. I'm on the right column. Last word on the line. V'kibalti, I have the following Masorah. I received the following tradition. Let me scroll down here. I'm sorry for those who are watching online. He says, V'kibalti, and I have the following tradition. Shehaya l'Ramban Talmid Achad. The great Ramban, the great Rishon, the Ramban, Nachmanides, he had a certain student, Reb Avner Hayashimo. This guy was known as Reb Avner. Now, Reb doesn't mean that he was a rabbi. Reb is like an honorific title, like Mr. So Reb Avner, they called him. Vinase Mumar. And Avner went off the deep end and he became a total apostate. Umazolo Goram, and his fate had it, Sha'Allah b'mayla. He achieved very high positions in the local government, via Nora b'chol, and he went beyond the local government and he became a very powerful player in the land. So this is this apostate Jew. Again, this is in Spain because that's where Ramban lived. He obviously converted to Christianity, and he rose to great positions of prominence and became a very powerful broker in Spain. Acharei hayamim, and it was after a number of days that he had gone on his sinful ways, b'Yom Kippur, and it was on a Yom Kippur. Shalach, he summoned v'hevi lefanav es Ramban. Look at the chutzpah here. On Yom Kippur, he pulls Ramban out of shul. You can imagine that Ramban is in shul or with his yeshiva in Spain. He's got good things to do. He's got spiritual pursuits to accomplish. And here's this no-goodnik, this Avner, this former student of his. He sends his goons to pluck the Ramban out of shul on Yom Kippur. He pulls out his former teacher, the Ramban. Ubefanav, and while he kind of forces Ramban to watch, I'm going to show you how many ways I'm going to desecrate Yom Kippur. Ubefanav harag ba'atzmo chazir echad. He took out a swine, he took out a pig, and he personally butchered it right in front of the Ramban on Yom Kippur. V'yinatcheu, he butchered it up, he cut it up into quarters and parts. V'yvashelu, and he makes a big fire and he starts roasting. He's got this big chazer roast going on Yom Kippur. And then after this, he eats it in front of Ramban. He says, I want you to watch what I'm going to do. This is what I think of Judaism. This is what I think of you, my former Rabbi. And I want you to watch this on Yom Kippur. He's committing what he believes to be the greatest sacrilege possible. And when he's all done, you can see he takes out his napkin and wipes off his greasy hands and face. Shalas Arav, he asks the Ramban, he asks Nachmanides, Al Kama Krisus Avar. How many violations of kares do you think, according to your system, your religious code, how many violations of kares, of spiritual excision, did I just violate? Because it's Yom Kippur, I lit a fire, I ate chazer, I ate blood, I did everything that you can imagine. I did work on Yom Kippur, everything. So he says, he's laughing. He says, okay, Ramban, my former Rabbi, tell me, how many violations of kares do you think I committed? The Heshiv Arav, and the Ramban does a calculation, and he says, Shayarba, I think you did 4. Again, he didn't say here what those 4 are. You can just imagine, again, he kindled the flame, he killed a creature, he ate tarfus and the blood. That's what I'm imagining the 4 were. So, Huamar, but Avner argues, because he's this former yeshiva student, Huamar, no, Shayu Chamesh, I argue with you. He says, I think, why are you stopping at 4? I think I violated 5. I don't know what the 5th one was. And he starts having this dispute. He's having this like halacha dispute with the Ramban on Yom Kippur. Look at this no good neck. How many kares violations did I just commit? And finally Ramban scowls at him. And he gives him the look of death, and it frightened him. You know, here's this guy, after all of his chutzpah, some look that the Ramban gave him must have been capable of giving the look of death, and it shook him up. Because this fellow, we're on the second column now, this fellow, as nasty as he was, he still had a little bit of awe and reverence of the Ramban. So it shook him up. Whatever this stare was, this look of death that the Ramban gave him, that was enough. It didn't even sound like he scolded him verbally. And finally, Ramban asks him, Sholarav, miyaviu el ha'amara, what brought you to this, make these terrible decisions? You've come a long way since you were in my shir. He's saying to him, it's been a long time since I graded your Gemara tests. What brought you to this point? There must have been some turning point in your life that sent you down the wrong path, over to the dark side. So he says, Veheshiv, and this Avner says, I'll tell you what, Ki b'pama achas, there was one time in your shir, Rabbi, Shama, I was listening to you, and here's what I heard. Shadarash, you made the following observation. You said, Parshas ha'azinu, shebeparsha, you were talking about Parshas Hazinu one time, Ramban, and I meant to look this up in the Ramban, in Parshas Hazinu, to see if he talks about this, and I forgot to do it. It was on my to-do list this week. He says there was one thing, it could be the Ramban spoke about stuff in Shir. Doesn't mean everything he spoke about he wrote down in his parish. Well, let's see. He says there was one time when you were teaching us Hazinu, Sheba Parsha Hahi, you made this astonishing statement, and you taught that in this Parsha of Hazinu, Kululim, you will find somehow hidden, somehow buried in Parshas Hazinu, Kol HaMitzvos. Every mitzvah of the 613 mitzvahs, they are alluded to somehow in a hidden fashion in Parshas Hazinu, because Hazinu is a very cryptic parsha. If you look at it, and you'll see it the Shabbos, it's a song, but it's very cryptic, like poetry, and what is it getting at? And the commentaries are full, saying what is Moshe trying to allude to. So Ramban apparently taught his shir that within Hazinu there are an incredible amount of secrets, and among those secrets you will find references to all 613 mitzvahs. And not only that, you will find there are hints to all of the world's events are in Parshas Hazinu. And because I thought that is impossible, now you're talking silly talk. Everything you taught us until now, I could have had my doubts about, but this pushed me over the edge. To say this astonishing thing that in this short parsha of Hazinu, you're telling me there's references to all 613 mitzvahs and all the world events, what was and what's going to be, there's some indication. Come on. He says, at that point, I said, I'm out of here. I'm done. Nepach li shacher. That's when I said I had it. I had it with this Judaism that you're pushing. And I marched over to the local church. I said, I'm ready to be baptized. And that's how I started my path down the dark side. And he says that was the final straw. Vayana Rav, and Ramban's listening to this, and he responds as follows: Vamar, Adayin ani omerze. I'm sticking to my guns. Yes, I taught that in Shir many years ago, and I still absolutely believe it, and I hold that it's true. V'sha'al ma shetirtza. And you know what? If you really doubt that you can find references in Parshas Hazinu to anything, ask me what's on your mind. And I'm going to use my chachma. Now, again, the Ramban was a very learned person, but also he was a mystical person. He says, I'll use my chachma. I hope God gives me the siyata d'shmaya, and I will show you, I will answer your questions. I will find for you in Parshas Hazinu whatever troubles you. Vayitzma ish mod. And the guy was astonished. V'yomar lo, and he says to the Ramban, Im kain, oh yeah, you want to do this? Fine. Im kainu, if this is true, hareni na im timsa shemi kasuv sham. Tell me if you can find my name. Tell me if you could find me in Parshas Hazinu. Ramban. Ramban says to him, Kain dibarta. Okay, that's your request. I'm going to do my best. Miyadai tivakshenu. Okay, you've asked of me, and I'm going to try and do this. V'tekef halach lo b'keren zavis. Ramban says, wait right there. He walks over to the corner. V'spalal, and he turns to Hashem, and he says, God, give me the insight, because this guy's putting me on the spot. I would imagine he had his lackeys in the room with him. And Ramban says he's challenging me, and everything is on the line here. God, I'm asking you, give me the inspiration I need to find this no goodnik, the reference to him in the parsha. The Yavo b'piv, and God answered Ramban's prayer, and it came to his lips or in his mouth. Pasuk. Here's the pasuk. Amarti afiyem ashbisa me'enosh zichram. That you see, I have on the bottom corner there. That's in chapter 32, Parak Lamed Beis. It's pasuk Chavav. Verse 26. Amarti Afiem says, this is God talking. I said that I would make an end of them. Ashbisa me enosh zichram. I will eradicate the remembrance from mankind. Pretty nasty pasuk. But he says, you're in there. And he says, how? He says, Ki os shlishi shal kol teva. If you look at the third letter of each word, there are 5 words in that pasuk. The third, I bolded them. You see, it's Resh, and then Aleph, and then Beis, Nun, Resh. If you look at it, that spells Reb Avner. He says, the Ramban tells him, that's your name. And look at what a terrible pasuk it's in. That's the pasuk. God is saying that I'm so disgusted by the sins that Klal Yisrael has committed, I'm going to absolutely destroy them, demolish them. There won't even be a remembrance of them left. That's what Ramban says. That's what came to me. That's you. That you're in Parshas Hazinu. Whew. But look at that. Do you see how that spells out the third letter of each one? So he says, when this Avner, when this no goodnik heard this, it rattled him to the core. Naflu panav, he fell on his face. Vishal Rabo, and he starts begging and asking the Ramban, Im yesh trufa l'machaso. Is there any remedy for my illness, for my wounds? In other words, all these years, he says, you just made a believer out of me, and now I realize everything that I blamed my apostasy on was ridiculous. Can you suggest any way that I could undo all the damage that I've done? The Yomer Rav Ramban says to him, Atoshamata Divrei Pasuk. What do you want from me? You just heard the pasuk. You asked me to find your name in the parsha. God gave me the inspiration, and I showed you your pasuk. And your pasuk is talking about being decimated, destroyed, eradicated, and your memory being erased. What do you want from me? That's your pasuk. That shows what God thinks about you. And Ramban says, I'm going back to Yom Kippur now. Whew. So Ramban says, I'm going back. I've had enough of this meeting. I'm going back to Shul, going back to Yom Kippur. The Tekef, and the tradition has it that what did this Avner do? Tekef lakach ha'ish sfina. Avner goes down to the shore, goes down to the nearest dock, and he either buys or he rents a boat. Bali malach, without a captain. We're going to see that word in Sefer Yonah, because remember in Yonah we're going to read on Yom Kippur. That's the word for the captain. That's the ship's captain. So he rents or he leases. He buys a boat with no captain. Umashot. It also, I had to look this one up. It has no oars. There's no way to steer this thing. The Yikanespo, he just goes into the boat. V'yelech basher holicho haruach, and he says, I'm going to go wherever God takes me, whatever God wants from me. That's my fate. I'm putting myself in God's hands, and he'll decide what to do with me. Nobody knows whatever became of this Abner. Did he come in some other country and become a Baal Teshuvah, and live a life of repentance? Did he end up stranded on some island like Robinson Crusoe? No one knows. No one knows. That was the last anyone ever heard of Avner. Pretty wild story. I'd never heard of this before, seeing in the Seder Adoros. But just again, I meant to look up and I didn't have a chance this week. Maybe I'll do it over Shabbos. I want to look up in the Ramban's Parish to Chumash. Does he make reference to this idea that every mitzvah and all of world events can be found hidden in Parshas Hazinu? I would love to see this in there. And then also this idea that what did this guy do? I mean, you talk about, okay, we all know people who have fallen off track and they no longer shomer Torah or mitzvahs, but to commit so many sacrileges, this is just extreme. And to do this in front of his Rabbi, not just his teacher, this wasn't like his third grade, teacher who taught him, how to sing Mos Sur Yeshua Sefer Chanukah. This was pulling in the Ramban, yanking. I mean, this is an unbelievable amount of chutzpah that this fellow had, this apostate, and whatever became of him, he says, we have no idea. This is where the story ends. We don't know. Did he come into some other country and live the rest of his life in Teshuvah? Did he drown? Did he end up, cast away on some island? Nobody knows. But this is the story that he brings down, having to do with Yom Kippur, which is next week, and also having to do with Parshas Hazinu, and a fascinating insight from the Ramban that in Parshas Hazinu, with all this cryptic poetry and the song of Hazinu, are references to all of the mitzvos in the Torah and all of world events. Now, I have on the top of side 2, this is one from Hanukkah time. From my recollection, they also put an ad in around the high holidays too. I'm rattled every time I see this. This is from one of the local non-kosher barbecue establishments, and here they got their smiling pig with his snout right on the front, wishing our customers and friends a very happy Hanukkah. Not even Hanukkah, but Hanukkah with a CH, and there's a menorah there. And then look at that line: banquet rooms available for your next simcha. I mean, it's not even saying for your next joyous occasion, for your next party. Like, there's something about this ad. Whenever I see it, it just is smacking. There's ignorance, and then there's chutzpah. To me, this is beyond ignorance. This also means this is someone who knows a little something. They're using the terminology simcha. They're saying Hanukkah with a ch. They got the menorah there. And then a chutzpah that taking out this ad. The real irony of this is, if you read the book of Maccabees, what finally started the war was the Hellenized Jews bringing pigs on the Mizbeach. So to me, that's like the ultimate irony of this ad. But I think they also take one out around the high holiday time. I didn't look carefully at last week's Hebrew Watchman or not, but yeah, this isn't. Yeah, every year Hanukkah you'll see this.
The first time I ever saw it, I was like,
yeah. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. This is beyond ignorance. This is chutzpah, because this means this person knows a little bit, and it's just ugh. And then, and again, the real irony is Hanukkah, because what the Book of the Maccabees tells us how the fighting began. And then I seem to recall, I should have looked last week. I probably threw it out already. Last week's Hebrew Watchman, but I seem to recall they also take out such an ad like this on the high holidays. All right, that's number 1. Again, this is number 1. I want to share with you number 2. Number 2 is something absolutely beautiful, and it's going to relate to something that I heard years ago from Rabbi Michal Tversky in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We'll get to Rav Michal Tversky in a minute. Rav Michal Tversky, was a younger brother of the famous Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Tversky, who passed away a couple years ago. So he's also a great uncle of Rabbi Nissan, our Rabbi Nissan here in Memphis. His grandfather was a brother of Rav Michal Tversky. So before we get to Rabbi Tversky, let's first take a look, and then I'll tell you how this evolved. Let's take a look on page 2 at this Mishnah, a very famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, and then we're going to see a commentary on it that I think is incredible. So the Mishnah on page 2, the Mishnah middle of the page says, the Mishnah taught as follows: Shammai Omer, the famous Shammai taught, Aseh Torah Chakeva, we should make our Torah study a permanent fixture of our lives. It shouldn't be something, okay, every now and then when I have time, I'll sit down and study some Torah. No, I want to have my Torah study should be a steady piece of my life. Vahave Mekabel, Emor Ma'at, say little, va'aseh harbe, and do a ton. Meaning, I shouldn't be one of these big talkers. We've all met people like this that tell you all of the ways they're going to help you with your cause or help you with whatever your needs are, and then at the end of the day, you can't find them. They were all talk, but they were no action. Shammai is telling us, don't be like that. Be the contrary. Be little talk, but get the job done. And greet everybody, receive everyone with a pleasant countenance, with a smile on our face. So these are the teachings of Shammai. Now, I always took it when we read Emor Ma'at V'aseh Harbe, like what I just said, that be the type of person that is not a big talker. You know, what's that expression? They talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. So we want to be the person that's the opposite. By the way, if you look in the commentaries to Pirkei Avos, I think it's Rashi and the others there say the example in Tanakh they always point to is Ephron Achiti. Because in Parshas Chayei Sarah, Ephron starts off when Avram needs to buy a spot to bury Sarah. So he says to Avram Avinu, I know you want to bury your dear wife Sarah. Sarah Imenu needs to be buried. And between you and me, come on, you can have whatever you want. He starts off, he's willing to do everything for free. And then Avram says, no, I really want to pay. And he says, oh, you want to pay? He charges him an arm and a leg. It emphasizes Arba Ma'il shekel over la socher. He charges him 400 of the most expensive silver coins that are out there. So they always point to Ephron Achiti as the ultimate example of the guy who's all talk and no action. You know, Avram said he wanted to pay. Okay, so make him pay it, but this is ridiculous what he did. Okay, that's how we always learn this. We're going to see there's a commentary out there called Midrash Shmuel. On the bottom of page 2, you see there a little bio. I found this on the title page. Who was the Midrash Shmuel? It was written by Rabbi Shmuel di Uzeda, and he was one of Rav Yitzchak Luria's, that was the Arizal, famous Kabbalist of Tzfat, first Egypt and Tzfat. So he was one of his most famous senior disciples. So he wrote a commentary to Tanakh called Midrash Shmuel. It's on some of the Megillas, but he also wrote it on Pirkei Avos. So on the top of page 3, let's see what Rav Shmuel di Uzeda, in the Midrash Shmuel, let's see what does he say Shammai was teaching when he said, Emor Ma'at, say little, but Aseh Harbe, do a lot. So he says as follows. V'od Shamati, he gives a couple of pshatim, but here's one of them. V'od Shamati, I've also heard, B'masha Amar Emor Ma'at v'Aseh Harbe. What was Shammai getting at when he said that we should talk little but do a lot? He's offering the following guidance. Shabbalah has here, he's coming to caution us. Lo Adam, is every human out there, Shmei Olam lo yotzi mipiv hatova shebelibo lasos. If I'm thinking about something good I want to do, I've got a resolution about a good deed I want to do. I want to help someone out, or a new mitzvah I want to take on, or something I want to be more serious about that's in the Torah. Don't verbalize it. Lo yomar esa mitzvah zehu hayom. Well, I'm going to do a certain mitzvah today. Oh, elmod hey prakim hayom. I'm going to learn 5 prakim of Mishnayos or something today. Don't verbalize it. Ki b'segula hu. It's just a well-known fact. As soon as a person verbalizes the good deed that they want to do, they won't end up learning what they said they were going to learn. They're never going to do the mitzvah. They're not going to do the chesed, the tzedakah they said they're going to do. Why? Because as soon as I verbalize it and I let the satan, this evil force, I let my yetzer hara know what is the good deed I want to do, now he's going to pull out with guns blazing everything he can to stop me. He'll bring all sorts of roadblocks in my way. All of a sudden, I'll hit all the traffic. I'll hit all the problems. The different distractions are going to come up. The kivan shemotzio b'tzvasav, because as soon as I verbalized it, miyada davar, as soon as I verbalized the good deed that I'm resolving to do, nishma ben mekatri gemu kavim. So all of my spiritual detractors, my spiritual prosecutors that are out to drag me down, that are out to stop me from doing good and from doing mitzvahs and from fulfilling the word of Hashem, as soon as I verbalize it, now they know what I want to do. They're going to pull out all stops to try and stop me. They'll do whatever they can to prevent me and to put out all the roadblocks. That's what Shammai is getting at. Emerlo, he's saying, Emor Ma'at, don't speak so much. Don't verbalize all the good intentions we have, because then we're going to activate all these dark spiritual forces and our own yetzer hara, our evil inclination to try to stop us. The less that I verbalize, we'll see, the more we end up doing. If I say all the good that I want to do, I won't even end up doing a little based on what I've said. So he's telling us this idea, the student of the Arizal, and he's telling us this is a well-known spiritual idea, is that if I verbalize the mitzvos, then what am I going to do? I'm sort of say, I'm sicking the Yetzer Hara. I'm going to sick my evil inclination on me. His job is to stop me. So the more I let him know what I want to do, he's going to pull out all stops to put up roadblocks and alter my plans. And I think we could all look at times in our lives where we wonder, what happened? I made this resolution. I said I was going to be there. I said I was going to help someone. I said I was going to do something right. And all of a sudden, I don't know what happened. Everything like almost conspired against me. So he's saying that's what he's suggesting Shammai's teaching. Don't verbalize it. Think about what we want to do, but don't verbalize it. As soon as we verbalize it, we're going to activate all of those spiritual forces that are trying to stop us. That's what the Medrash Shmuel says. Now, why am I mentioning this, and what does it have to do with Yom Kippur? What does it have to do with Reb Michal Twersky? So I'm going to say this is about, oh man, I don't know if this was 8 years ago. I'd have to look back at my notes. How many years ago? It's probably more. I don't remember the years. It was probably about 10 years ago or so. So I went to Yeshiva High School in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, WITS, and Wisconsin Institute for Torah Study. They're on the other side of town. They're on the east side of Milwaukee, and Rabbi Twersky was a wonderful Talmud Chacham, a holy Jew, just the warmest personality. There's a beautiful picture of him I saw online. Look at him dancing. It must have been at like a Hachnasas Sefer Torah. Just you can't see it because it's not in color, but on color you see it on the screen. It's just like this golden bekisha that he's wearing. He's just very regal. His uncle was the Bobover Rabbi in Borough Park. If you've ever seen pictures, I remember he once came to visit him. Baba. So Halberstam was the name of his uncle. His mother was the sister of the Bobover Rebbe. So the Bobover Rebbe was a Holocaust survivor, Shlomo Halberstam. And I remember once when he was an elderly man, he came to Milwaukee to visit his sister, Rabbi Twersky's mother. And the whole community came to Rabbi Twersky's shul for this, grand welcoming of Rabbi Twersky's uncle, Bobover Rebbe. I have no idea what he said because he was speaking in Yiddish. And after every 2 sentences, Rabbi Twersky he speaks a beautiful English, would translate and speak in English what it was that Rabbi Halberstam said. I have no memory of what he said, but I just remember just being mesmerized. He was wearing like this shiny aqua blue bekisha, and it was just it almost seemed as if it was plugged into the batteries or the wall. Like it was just glowing.
How old would you have been a young
I was like 13, 14 at the time, and his face, he had this hadras panim, he had this snow white beard. He was just a beautiful looking person. I just remember saying like, this is this angelic looking man. Like he had this beautiful looking person. I remember Rabbi Twersky was standing next to him. He introduced him to the community. He said, this is my saintly uncle. And, he also taught me, he was my Rebbe. And he every 2 sentences or so, he was stopping to translate. I have no idea what he said. I just remember sitting there like, what? What am I looking at? So a lot of that rubbed off on Rabbi Twersky, Rabbi Michal Twersky. So every year during the Aseret Simei Teshuvah, he would come to WITS to speak to the yeshiva, to give like a tshuva talk. And he would offer very encouraging words to the boys and give everyone a real lift before Yom Kippur. And it was already, I think I was living in Pennsylvania at the time. That's what I'm thinking. This was at least 10 years ago. So the Alumni Association, they would record it and they would send it out to everyone. And he told over at the end of his talk, he told over the most fantastic story. And that's what I want to share with you this morning. And you'll see how it's related to this Medrash Shmuel. He said he knows the rabbi who this happened to because the rabbi called him for guidance. He says there's a rabbi in Chicago who's very involved with Jewish outreach. And he calls Rabbi Twersky that year during a certain tshuva, and he says, you got to give me a suggestion here. I just received the wildest story from one of my students. He's a Jewish guy who's growing, he's learning more, he's becoming more observant. He just reached out to me with the most wild story, and I need some guidance how to deal with this. So what's the story? This guy worked for his entire working career as a police officer in Chicago. Hard-working police officer. He's been walking the beat. He's really, it's not a desk job. He's really been a hard-working police officer. And he started going. It's the last couple of years, he got very, something happened that got him turned on about his Judaism. He had grown up, he said his last name was Becker. He had grown up with absolutely no Jewish connection whatsoever. Something happened that got him interested. So he started going to learn with this outreach center in Chicago, and he was becoming more and more observant. And it got to the point where he was really observant. He was davening every day. He was putting on tefillin. Started pretty much keeping Shabbos. He was almost at the point of keeping Shabbos. And the last big thing that he had was he was going to take on keeping exclusively kosher. He had been incorporating that into his diet and into his routine, that he was eating almost totally kosher, but he wasn't 100% there yet. And this guy he was at the point where he was almost exclusively observing kosher. And he says, okay, I'm going to do it, but there's one thing I have to do first. He says, as a cop, I've always gone, my favorite place to eat when I wanted to pick me up was this classic drive-in place that's in Chicago. It's called Super Dog. Super Dog is spelled A-U-G, dog, D-A-U-G. WG, Super Dog. And they have two locations. They've got one in Chicago, one a little further out in Wheeling. And he says every time, I guess it must have been on his beat, on his patrol beat, there was a Super Dog. And they make the most fantastic hot dogs, homemade sausages. He says, that's like my last taiva that I have, that Super Dog. It's been part of my life forever. And I decided I'm going to start exclusively keeping kosher after my last visit to Super Dog. So he's going to take one last trip. He's going to Super Dog. And he decides, I want to go there in the afternoon when it's not crowded. And he goes to Super Dog. And he says, he's like, Harini Mukhanu Mizuma, this is my last Super Dog before I start keeping exclusive kosher. And he says it was phenomenal. And he's just enjoying that. He's just shaking his head. That was phenomenal. He's there. He's going to say goodbye to Super Dog. That's it. And it's pretty much empty because it's like 3:00 in the afternoon. And there's this one elderly guy there. And, he comes over to him and he saes, you seem like you're really enjoying that Super Dog. So he says, yeah, I love it. So he says, everything okay? Because it's my last one. So he says, why? Tell me, why is it your last Super Dog? So he says, how am I going to start explaining to him that, because I'm deciding to start keeping exclusively kosher, I can't do that. So he says, I'll tell him a different story. He says, well, I've worked my whole career as a police officer here in Chicago, and I'm retiring, and I'm going to be on a fixed income, and I've got to figure out what are luxuries, what are necessities, and I don't really need Super Dog. This is a luxury. So I decided this is my last week as a Chicago police officer. This is my last Super Dog. Once I get on my fixed income, I'm not going to do this anyway. He says, that's the safest thing to say. Guy says, this breaks my heart. And he pulls out of his pocket, he pulls out a card, he writes something on it, and he says, please, whenever you don't cut out Super Dog from your routine, it breaks my heart. You've given your life keeping Chicago safe. Don't do it. Whenever you want a Super Dog, come here and show this card to the cashier. And he looks at the card, and it says, it's on like a stationary card by a guy named Maury Berman. Maury Berman was the founder and owner of Super Dog. It sounds like a real Jewish name, by the way, Maury Berman. So Maury Berman is the founder and owner of Super Dog. And it is a card saying, whoever is behind the counter, this is Maury Berman, the owner. Whenever this man arrives and he shows his card, it's on the house, it's on me, based on all of his years of service to the city of Chicago. And I don't believe this. He says, he calls his rabbi. He says, what is going on here? He says, I've worked so hard. I've been learning Torah. I'm davening. I'm putting on the phone. I started keeping Shabbos. I'm ready to be exclusively kosher. I went for my last trip to Super Dog. And look what happened. Like, why is God giving me this nisayon? Why is God giving me this test? This is too much. I can't handle this. What is going on here? Does he not want me to keep kosher? Why did I have to sit down there and tell the sob story that I made up to this guy who ended up being the owner, Maury Berman, and he gave me this card. I can have Super Dogs every day of the week now. Why is God doing this to me? Where is the justice? He's like, he's screaming, like, where's the justice? Tell me, why is God doing this to me? So this rabbi called Rabbi Twersky, who's Chicago and Milwaukee are not far. It's just about an hour and a half drive. So he called Rabbi Twersky. He says, Rabbi, what do I say to the guy? So Rabbi Michal says to him, and I don't know if he knew this Medrash Shmuel, Rabbi Michal Twersky says to him, here's what you tell him. Everything that happened makes total sense. And this is the way it works. You make a resolution, and as soon as you make that resolution about the mitzvah you're going to do, the avera you're going to stay away from, the good deed, the chesed you're going to be involved, the tzedakah you're going to have, the Satan is going to send blockades. He's going to send roadblocks. He's going to send excuses. He's going to send everything possible to stop us because that's his job. His job is to keep us down and keep us from connecting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, keep us from performing Torah, performing mitzvahs, and doing what it is that we want to do and fulfilling the Ratzon Hashem. So that is what the Satan does. Get used to it. And don't be so shocked. He's doing his job. You've got to do your job. Your job is to plow ahead. And don't be so shocked. And don't think it's going to go away. Whenever you decide you're going to spend money buying your lulav and esrog, I guarantee you something is going to come up that's going to put a challenge toward that. Whatever mitzvah it's going to be, it's going to happen. And don't be shocked by this. Don't take this as some sign God doesn't want me to do it. You know, why is he doing this? It's going to happen because that's the Satan's job. His job is to drag you down and stop you from connecting with Hashem and start living with this reality and get used to it. And on your path to observance, you're going to experience this more than once. And this is the bitter pill. Learn how to deal with it. He says that's what Rabbi Tversky said. So he turns to the room full of people, to the whole yeshiva, and it's before Yom Kippur, and he says, everyone in this room has their super dog. He goes, I don't care what it is. He says, I don't care what it is. You may not be going to super dog, but you got your super dog. Everyone here has our super dog. Everyone has our thing that we're trying to stay away from. Everyone has some way, some resolution that we're making for the coming year about how we're going to do better at whatever piece of Torah, whatever mitzvah it is, whatever it is. We've all got our super dog and we're all making resolutions, but we also need to be prepared and don't be shocked. Be prepared. As soon as we want to act on it, you're going to see it's going to be like clockwork. It's going to be magic. Something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. It might not be this guy writing you the card that you're entitled to free super dogs for the rest of your life, but something's going to happen. The opportunity to sin, that opportunity to stumble and get caught up in the same mishigas that we're trying to get away from, it's going to present itself easier than ever before. It's going to be there. That's the way the Satan works. So be prepared. And if we're aware of this, as Sodi was saying, if we're aware of this, we have our eyes in our head, we know what to expect, we know the challenges that lay ahead, it becomes easier to deal with because now it's not going to throw us for a loop. We won't be as surprised. It's not going to be a curveball coming out of nowhere. We kind of know it's coming. And he goes, I guarantee it. You can almost bet on it. And he says, fine, whatever resolution it is you have, as soon as you stick to your guns and you say, that's what I'm going to keep to, something's going to happen. You're going to have your super dog moment. That's what he was telling the room full of people. I don't know if you knew this Medrash Shmuel. When I saw this, I photocopied. I was already living here in Memphis when I bumped into this Medrash Shmuel. I photocopied. I wrote a letter to Rabbi Tversky, and I said, Rabbi Tversky, we've met. You don't remember me because you met a gazillion people, but I'm an alumnus of Witz. I went to the yeshiva there. I remember coming to your community, your shul for Shabbos. We've met. I've shaken your hand, but you don't know why. We never had a close relationship. But you told over this incredible super dog story. And the alumni director sent it out, probably about 10 years ago, whatever it was. And that story made such an impression on me. And I just found this Medrash Shmuel, which fits like a glove with everything that you said. I think you'd love this. And I think you'd love it for your repertoire. So here it is. I mailed it to him. And this Medrash Shmuel, what he might be saying for Shammai is that, this is going to happen, but it'll even happen even more pronounced the more we verbalize, the more public we are about our resolution, then the more the super dog idea, comes into effect there. So that was that. Rabbi Tversky is a very busy man. I didn't get a letter back from him. I'm sure he received it. I didn't get a letter back from him. And again, for all I know, he already knew about this Medrash Shmuel. And maybe that's why this super dog story was already based on. And here it was like, I'm just telling him something that he already knew. I don't know. But be that as it may, I think this is so important for all of us to realize as we're going into the new year. We have already started the new year. We've already started 5784. And we're in that Sarasime Tshuva. All of us have our aspects in our lives that we're trying to improve upon. And not to be surprised, not to be shattered when all of a sudden, despite our resolution, despite our efforts to try to do good, something comes up that all of a sudden just seems to be throwing us for a loop. Don't take it as, okay, God must not want me to do this. No, he wants me to do it, but now the Satan's doing his job. Our Yetzer Hara is doing its job. The job of that Yetzer Hara, of our Satan, the job is to try to drag us down, put the weights on our ankles and keep us from getting to where we need to, our goals that we need to achieve spiritually and keep us and build barriers between us and Hashem. If we're aware of this fact, if it's a reality, it'll be less jarring, less startling And it won't throw us as a curveball. It'll be, okay, that's that expected roadblock. I knew that was coming. There it is. There's my super dog. And that's something that I think could enable us to get past that roadblock, which is going to be inevitable. It's going to come up no matter what area it is that we want to improve upon. It's going to come up, and knowing that it's going to come up could give us the strength we need and the preparedness that we need to overcome it. So our collective bracha is, God willing, in this coming year, we should all achieve the goals that we've set for ourselves. Let's be realistic. Let's not, shoot for the stars. Let's be realistic in what our goals are. But we all have areas to improve upon, and God willing, we should succeed at all that we want to set out to accomplish, and Hashem should give us the strength to overcome the challenges that are inevitably going to try and get in the way, that are going to be placed in our way by the Satan, by our Yetzer Hara, by our evil inclination, going to be placed in our way to try to prevent us from becoming the best Jew, the best person that we possibly can be. With that, I want to wish everyone a Gemar Chasima Tova. I'm gonna just shut off the recording, and then I'll ask if anyone has